Before we dive into this chaos, drop a comment and let me know, where in the world are you tuning in from? Maybe you're relaxing in a beachside condo in Florida, stuck in the hustle of a downtown Los Angeles high-rise, or enjoying the calm of a farmhouse out in Kansas. I always love seeing just how far these wild Karen stories of drama and karma can reach. The morning air carried the crisp scent of freshly cut grass, sharp and sweet, blending with the faint hiss of sprinklers, keeping the lawns glossy and green. A bright sun hung overhead, scattering gold across the suburban street. From the outside, it looked like the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever went wrong, where families smiled, children biked without fear, and every driveway mirrored the next with its gleaming SUVs and trimmed hedges. But behind the garage door of one beige, stone-trimmed house, tension waited to be unleashed. The groan of metal echoed as the garage door lifted, inch by inch, revealing a shadowy interior filled with the smell of grease, rubber, and faintly lingering polish. Standing in front of it was a man of 35, his long dark hair tied neatly back into a ponytail. He wore navy blue coveralls, lightly smudged with oil, a uniform that hinted at hours spent kneeling under hoods, tightening bolts, and coaxing machines back to life. His hand clenched a small set of keys. The metal glinted under the sun like a promise. As the light filtered in, it illuminated what lay inside the garage. A pristine black Chevrolet Camaro SS from the late 1960s. Its body was immaculate. The paint so polished it reflected the clouds, as if they were painted directly onto its surface. The chrome trim sparkled, as though it had been forged yesterday. This car wasn't just a machine, it was a monument. He inhaled deeply, the scent of wax and gasoline stirring memories of years past, nights spent alone in the garage after work, tools clinking as he worked methodically, step by step, to restore what many would have abandoned as scrap. He whispered almost reverently, "Finally, you're back." The words were quiet, nearly swallowed by the neighborhood hum of lawnmowers and the distant bark of a dog. He stepped forward, brushing his hand along the smooth metal, savoring the weight of the moment. Then came the sharp voice, shrill enough to pierce the morning calm. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The words froze him mid-step. His jaw tightened. Slowly, he turned, and there she was, Lily. She stood at the edge of his driveway, squat and heavy-set, her floral shirt clinging uncomfortably as if the fabric itself wanted to escape her. Her short brown hair was disheveled, and sweat already beaded on her forehead despite the cool breeze. She stomped forward in her sneakers, every step deliberate, as though the entire neighborhood belonged to her. "That," she said, pointing one stubby finger at the Camaro, "is my car." He blinked, confusion breaking across his face. "Excuse me." "I bought that yesterday," she snapped, planting her hands on her hips. "Don't play dumb. You're lucky I caught you before you drove off with it." The man laughed once, humorless. "You're insane. This is my Camaro. I've spent years restoring it." Her face twisted into something between outrage and delight. Outrage, because he dared to contradict her. Delight, because an audience was forming. A curtain twitched across the street. A neighbor watering his lawn tilted his head, pretending not to stare but failing. Lily raised her voice, ensuring every ear within range caught her words. "You're a thief," she bellowed. "Stealing cars from hard-working women in this community? Pathetic." He stepped forward, fists tightening around the keys in his hand. "You don't even know what you're talking about. I've got the paperwork, the photos, every single receipt. This is mine. Paperwork can be faked," she sneered. "And you look exactly like the type who'd fake it. You're not even employed properly. Everyone knows you just tinker in that garage all day." Heat rose in his chest. He forced himself to steady his breath, but anger churned under his skin. He could feel the stares, the judgment already forming, the whispers he knew would spread like wildfire by nightfall. Then Lily reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. With a practiced flick of her finger, she dialed. "Hello? Yes, this is an emergency," she announced theatrically, her voice carrying across the cul-de-sac. "There's a man here stealing my car. A black Camaro. Yes, he's still here. Hurry." She locked eyes with him as she spoke, a wicked gleam flashing in her pupils, daring him to react. He took a step back, his stomach twisting. This couldn't be happening. Not over his own garage, his own property, his father's car. But the sirens came faster than he expected, wailing faintly in the distance before swelling louder, until the flashing blue and red lights cut across his driveway. Tires crunched against asphalt. A squad car pulled up and 2 officers stepped out, their expressions calm, unreadable. Lily wasted no time, waving her arms like a conductor before an orchestra. "Officers, that's him. He broke into my garage and tried to steal my Camaro. Thank God I caught him in time." The man's voice cracked with disbelief. "This is my house. This is my garage. This is my car. She's lying." The taller officer raised his hand, silencing both of them. "Sir, we'll need to see proof of ownership." He fumbled with his phone, pulling up photos of the restoration, the bill of sale from years back, old texts exchanged with his late father about finding the Camaro in a junkyard. His hands trembled, not from guilt, but from fury and humiliation. He held them out like evidence in a trial. But Lily cut in before the officers could look closely. "He doctored those," she spat. "Anyone with a computer can fake a title. Look at him. Grease all over his clothes. Doesn't even look like he could afford a car like that. He probably runs some chop shop out of this garage." The neighbors shifted uneasily. A man across the street pulled out his phone to record. A woman whispered to her husband, eyes darting toward the Camaro gleaming like a jewel under the sun. The man wanted to shout, to scream that they were all blind for believing her, but the weight of their silence pressed harder than her words. One officer glanced at him, then at Lily. "Until this is sorted, the vehicle cannot leave the premises." The words cut deeper than he expected. His heart hammered. "You're telling me I can't even drive my own car because she says it's hers?" "Sir, calm down," the officer warned. "We'll look into this. But for now, it stays here." Lily's lips curled into a slow, triumphant smirk. "Don't worry, officers. I'll keep an eye on it. We wouldn't want him to sneak off with my property." The man's jaw locked. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to lash out, to call her bluff in front of everyone. But he didn't. He stood there, fists clenched so tightly around the keys they dug into his skin. The Camaro glinted in the sun, trapped in limbo. And for the first time since he had restored it, the car felt less like freedom and more like a prison. The officers gave him one last look, then walked back to their vehicle, murmuring into radios, their presence heavy, but detached. Neighbors lingered, whispering louder now, emboldened by Lily's confidence. She stood in the center of it all, hands on her hips, victorious, as though she had won some battle. The man looked at her, silent but seething, the world narrowing to her smug grin and the car behind him. He knew then this was not going to end here. This was only the beginning, and she had no idea what storm she had just set in motion. The days that followed felt like living under siege. Each morning began the same way. The man walked out to fetch the newspaper, and there it was, another note taped to his garage door in Lily's sprawling, angry handwriting. "This property is under HOA review. Remove the unauthorized vehicle immediately." The first time he crumpled it, tossing it aside, but by the 4th and 5th he kept them, tucking them into a drawer, his anger simmering with each new one. They were not just notes, they were declarations of war. Lily seemed to thrive on escalation. She prowled the neighborhood like a self-appointed sheriff, stopping neighbors mid-step to whisper about the so-called thief living in the beige house with the stone trim. He could see her from his kitchen window, leaning on fences, gesturing toward his garage, painting herself as a victim of grand theft. The man knew the truth, but the power of repetition was on her side. Lies spoken often enough became truths to those eager for drama. Soon, cold glances followed him at the mailbox, and conversations died when he approached. The complaints came next. Official-looking letters, stamped with HOA insignia, accusing him of everything from oil stains on the driveway to unauthorized vehicle storage. One claimed his Camaro lowered the aesthetic value of the community. Another insisted he was running an unlicensed business out of his garage. Each envelope delivered a fresh blow, not just to his patience, but to his sense of belonging. He had worked tirelessly to keep to himself, to avoid conflict, but now the conflict seeped into his very home, unwelcome and relentless. At night, when the street settled and lights blinked out one by one, he would sit in the garage with the Camaro, the silence pierced only by the ticking of cooling metal and the distant hum of crickets. He would run a hand along the hood, the black paint cool under his fingertips, and think of his father. He remembered the day they found the car together in a field, rusted and forgotten. His father's voice, gravelly with excitement, had said, "Son, she just needs someone to believe in her." Now, staring at the same machine, restored to glory, he felt the weight of that promise pressing on his chest. He would not let it be stolen, not by Lily, not by anyone. But holding on to resolve didn't shield him from humiliation. One afternoon, he opened his garage door to work on tightening a bolt beneath the Camaro, only to hear Lily's shrill voice call out across the street. "Caught you again." She stood there with her phone raised, recording as though he were a criminal caught red-handed. Neighbors gathered, drawn by the noise, and Lily performed for them like a seasoned actor. "You see this," she said, pointing to him under the car. "He's modifying stolen property. Classic tactic. They strip it down, repaint it, then resell it." He slid out from beneath the car, his face streaked with sweat and grease, and met the cluster of curious eyes. "This is my car," he said evenly, holding back the fury threatening to explode. "I have every document, every photo of the restoration. You've all seen me working on it for years." But the crowd murmured uncertainly. Lily laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Paperwork means nothing when possession is mine. And if the law won't protect me, the HOA will." The man realized something then. Reasoning with her was like shouting into a storm. She fed on conflict, on the attention it brought, and every time he answered her accusations, he gave her more fuel. He tried silence, tried ignoring her theatrics, but silence only emboldened her. She began pounding on his garage door at odd hours, shouting accusations loud enough to wake the street. The more he withdrew, the more she advanced, as though his retreat confirmed her lies. The tension broke one evening, when he returned from the grocery store. He parked in the driveway and froze. Scratches clawed across the garage door handle, deep and uneven, as though someone had fumbled with a tool trying to pry it open. His heart sank. He set the bags down slowly, scanning the shadows, every instinct alert. The garage was still locked, the Camaro safe, but the violation was undeniable. Someone had tried to break in. He knew who it had to be. His mind replayed her taunts, her obsession, the gleam in her eyes whenever she stared at the Camaro. But without proof, accusing her outright would only backfire. He needed evidence. That night he installed small, discreet cameras around the garage, their lenses tucked into corners, barely visible under the eaves. He checked them twice before heading inside, his resolve hardening. 2 nights later, the cameras delivered what he needed. He sat at his workbench, staring at the footage on his laptop. There was Lily, unmistakable in her floral shirt, creeping across his lawn just after midnight. A flashlight beam darted across the siding, pausing at the garage window. She pressed her face against the glass, peering in, her breath fogging the pain. Then she tugged at the handle, testing it, her movements quick and nervous. The footage showed her circling the Camaro like a vulture around prey before finally slinking away into the night. He leaned back, pulse pounding, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. At last, undeniable proof. But as satisfying as it was, the weight of what it meant sank in quickly. She wasn't going to stop. She was escalating. He replayed the footage, watching the obsession in her movements, and knew this wasn't about the car anymore. To her, this was about control. The Camaro was just the stage. The next day, he tried once more to confront her, hoping that showing her the footage might scare her into retreat. He caught her as she waddled down the sidewalk, clutching a clipboard she used to mimic authority. "Lily," he said, voice low but firm, "I've got you on camera. Sneaking onto my property, peering into my garage, trying to break in. I could take this straight to the police." For a moment, he thought he saw fear flicker in her eyes. But then she laughed, loud and mocking, shaking her head. "Oh, please. Who do you think they'll believe? A nobody grease monkey? Or me, the woman who keeps this neighborhood running? I'll tell them I was checking on my property. I'll tell them you threatened me. You don't stand a chance." Her words struck like blows, but underneath the venom was truth. Without a plan, without strategy, he couldn't win by going toe-to-toe. She thrived on spectacle, on twisting stories, on dragging him into public battles, where her volume drowned out his facts. Reasoning had failed. Direct confrontation had failed. If he wanted to protect himself, to protect his Camaro, he needed something more. Something smarter. That night, he sat again in his garage, the security footage looping on his laptop, the Camaro gleaming silently beside him. His fingers tapped against the workbench, restless, his mind racing. He could feel the storm inside him shifting. No longer just anger, but calculation. He thought about her arrogance, her greed for attention, the way she couldn't resist proving she was in control. That was her weakness. He leaned forward, staring at the frozen image of Lily's face pressed against his garage window. "All right," he whispered into the empty room, his voice steady, dangerous. "You want a war? You've got one." And with that, he began to plan. The decision to fight back did not come lightly, but once it settled in his mind, it became unshakable. The man spent the following days in quiet preparation, every movement deliberate, every choice sharpened with purpose. Lily thought she had him cornered, humiliated before the neighborhood and trapped by her endless complaints, but she had no idea how thoroughly he had begun to turn her own weapons against her. His first step was research. He scoured the HOA guidelines, combing through every page of the dense bylaws Lily so often waved around like sacred scripture. He found violations, many of them committed by her alone. Her overflowing trash bins had sat on the curb for 3 days last month, documented neatly by timestamps in his camera archives. Her lawn ornaments, garish plastic flamingos in bright pink, were explicitly unapproved. Even her front porch, cluttered with boxes she never moved inside, broke the rules she wielded against others. He organized these violations into a file, complete with dates, photographs, and highlighted passages from the rulebook. What she had claimed as her authority became the rope he intended to tighten around her neck. The second step was exposure. He spent hours editing the footage from his security cameras, splicing together the clearest moments. Lily skulking across his lawn, yanking at the garage handle, pressing her nose against the window, muttering to herself. He added captions that made her obsession undeniable, paired with timestamps and quiet narration recorded in his calm, measured voice. "This is the woman who called the police on me," he explained in the video. "This is the woman who claims I stole my own car. Watch closely and decide who the real thief is." He didn't embellish. He didn't need to. Her actions condemned her better than any accusation he could make. When the video was finished, he uploaded it to social media under the title, "HOA Karen Tries to Steal My Camaro." Within hours, the views began to climb. By morning, the comment section exploded with outrage, laughter, and mockery at her antics. Strangers from across the country shared their own stories of neighborhood bullies, each remark sharpening the narrative. Lily was no protector of the community. She was a predator caught in the act. The man sat at his workbench, watching the numbers rise, a quiet satisfaction settling into his chest. Word spread quickly. By the weekend, neighbors who had once glared at him with suspicion now looked at him differently. Some even knocked on his door, embarrassed, apologizing for believing her lies. They had seen the video. They had heard his calm explanations against her manic accusations. Public opinion was shifting, and Lily, desperate for attention, only made things worse. She confronted him in the driveway, screaming that he had defamed her, while more neighbors gathered with their phones raised, recording every second. The harder she fought to regain control, the more she sank into ridicule. Then came the knock on his door that changed everything. It was the HOA board, 3 members standing stiffly in press shirts, clipboards tucked under their arms. They explained that multiple complaints had been filed against Lily. Violations stacked higher than they had ever seen. The man led them calmly down the sidewalk, pointing to her cluttered porch, her unapproved ornaments, the photos he had printed of her bins and lawn neglect. The board members took notes, their faces grim, nodding as the evidence piled higher. By the end of the inspection, the verdict was inevitable. Fines would be issued, and further harassment could lead to her removal from the community entirely. But the true climax came when the police arrived again, summoned once more by Lily's frantic calls. She had doubled down, screaming that the Camaro was hers, that he had hacked into her life, that the entire neighborhood was conspiring against her. 2 officers walked up the driveway, but this time the man was ready. He presented them with a full title, notarized and verified, along with decades-old photographs of him and his father standing beside the Camaro in its rusted infancy. He showed them the restoration receipts, the documented VIN, the consistent record of ownership. The officers turned to Lily. "Do you have any proof of purchase?" one asked. She stammered, her bluster faltering for the first time. I don't need proof. Everyone knows it's mine. I told you I bought it." "Do you have a title? A bill of sale? Anything at all?" Her mouth opened and closed, no words forming. The silence stretched painfully as neighbors watched, recording the moment with their phones. Her face turned crimson, sweat dripping down her temples, but still she tried, her voice cracking with desperation. "This is harassment. You're all against me." The officers exchanged a glance. One turned to the man. "Sir, you're cleared. The vehicle is yours, legally and unquestionably. We apologize for the repeated disruptions." The words were more satisfying than he had imagined. For the first time in weeks, the weight on his chest lifted. He turned to Lily, who looked as if the ground beneath her feet had collapsed, her authority shattered in full view of the community she had terrorized. As if scripted by fate, the sound of a tow truck rumbled into the cul-de-sac at that exact moment. Heads turned as it pulled up to the curb, not for his Camaro, but for Lily's SUV parked arrogantly across 2 driveways. The driver stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Repossession order. This vehicle's being taken." The collective gasp from the neighbors echoed like a verdict. Lily shrieked, running toward the truck, but the driver ignored her, securing the SUV with swift, practiced motions. The sight was almost too poetic. The woman who had tried to claim his car as hers now watched helplessly as her own vehicle was hooked up and dragged away. Neighbors laughed, some clapping, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Phones filmed every second, ensuring the humiliation would live far beyond this street. Lily's screams cracked, her voice growing hoarse as the tow truck pulled away, her SUV shrinking into the distance. She stood in the middle of the street, fists balled, chest heaving, her empire of lies reduced to nothing in the span of minutes. The man watched her silently from his driveway, the Camaro gleaming behind him, its polished chrome catching the sun like a crown of victory. In the days that followed, the neighborhood transformed. People who had once avoided him now waved, offered apologies, and even compliments on the Camaro. Some stopped to admire it openly, their admiration genuine rather than laced with suspicion. Peace slowly returned, the tension bleeding out of the air. And yet, the memory of Lily's downfall lingered, a cautionary tale etched into every lawn and porch. One evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the street in warm orange light, the man slid into the driver's seat of the Camaro. The leather was smooth, the engines rumbled deep and alive beneath his hands. He guided it out of the garage, onto the street, the roar of the engine turning heads up and down the block. For the first time in years, the car felt free, not just restored but vindicated. As he drove past Lily's now vacant house, she had left abruptly, shamed and silent. He slowed just enough to glance at the empty windows. A smirk tugged at his lips. He revved the engine once, the sound thundering down the quiet street, before continuing on, the road stretching ahead like a promise. In the end, she had called the police on him for opening his own garage, had screamed to anyone who would listen that he was a thief. But the truth had a way of shining through, as undeniable as the Camaro's polished chrome under the afternoon sun. She had tried to steal his pride, his peace, his history. Instead, she lost everything of her own. And though the neighborhood was quiet again, he knew the story would live on, not just in his memory, not just in the shared whispers of neighbors, but in the countless screens across the world replaying the footage of her downfall. For once, justice had not only been served, it had been witnessed.